Hey, time for another unbelievable story. They say trust is everything. But what happens when 15 years of absolute trust vanish because of a single, accidentally seen notification on your husband's phone? Today you'll meet Sarah, whose world flipped when a gut feeling and that notification forced her to find the hidden truth right in her own dining room. Part number one.
I never imagined that a single notification could destroy 15 years of trust. It flashed across my husband's phone while he was in the shower, lighting up the kitchen counter for just a second. Delete our messages before she sees them. The sender's name made my stomach drop. Emily, my best friend. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My coffee slipped from my hand, splashing across the floor, but I barely noticed. My mind raced to find a reasonable explanation. Maybe they were planning a surprise party. Maybe she was asking him for advice about her marriage. Maybe anything but what my heart was already screaming. When he walked back into the kitchen, drying his hair with a towel, I was already kneeling on the floor, wiping up the coffee with shaking hands. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smile without looking at him. "Yeah, just dropped my mug." He kissed the top of my head like he always did. "I'll buy you another one." If only replacing broken things were that easy. My name is Sarah, and until that morning, I believed I had a marriage most people envied. Mark and I had been together since college. We weren't the loud, overly romantic couple who posted love quotes online every day, but we had something I thought was stronger: routine, trust, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone completely. At least, I thought I knew him. We bought our first house 5 years earlier. Every Sunday, we made pancakes together. Every Friday, we watched a movie on the couch. We argued about silly things, like whose turn it was to take out the trash. But we always laughed before going to bed. People used to tell us we made marriage look easy. I believed them. Emily had been part of my life for almost 10 years. We met at work when we were both new hires, and she quickly became the sister I never had. She came to every birthday, every holiday dinner, every barbecue in our backyard. When her own marriage started falling apart about a year earlier, I was the first person she called. "I don't know what's happening anymore," she cried one night over the phone. "It's like we're strangers living in the same house." I spent hours listening to her. Sometimes she'd come over after work just to vent while Mark grilled dinner outside. Looking back now, those evenings replay in my head differently. Back then, they looked harmless. Now, every smile feels suspicious. Emily eventually started stopping by, even when I wasn't home yet. She'd text me, "I'm nearby. Mind if I wait at your place?" Of course I didn't mind. She was family, or at least I thought she was. Mark always told me he didn't want her feeling alone. "She's going through a rough time," he'd say. "Everyone needs support." I remember feeling grateful that my husband was so compassionate. I actually bragged about him. "You know how lucky I am?" I told one of my coworkers once. Most husbands would complain about having company all the time. Mark always makes Emily feel welcome. Now, those words make me feel sick. The strange moments were tiny at first. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and conversations would stop. Emily would suddenly remember she had somewhere else to be. Mark would glance down at his phone and lock the screen a little too quickly. Each moment lasted only seconds. Each one was easy to dismiss. I even scolded myself for noticing. "You're being paranoid. They've both always been honest with you. Stop looking for problems that don't exist." Life went on. We celebrated our anniversary. Emily came to dinner. She even took a picture of us outside the restaurant and smiled while saying, "You two are relationship goals." I thanked her. She hugged me. And now I wonder if she already knew she was lying to my face. Over the next few weeks, little things continued piling up. Mark suddenly started taking his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. Emily became oddly unavailable whenever I suggested we spend time together alone. If I mentioned something to one of them, the other somehow already knew. Coincidences. That's what I kept calling them. Until one evening, everything changed. Mark had fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching television. His phone buzzed against the cushion beside him. The screen lit up just enough for me to see the preview before it went dark again. My heart stopped. It was another message from Emily. This time, I didn't have to imagine what I'd seen. The words were unmistakable. "Did you delete everything?" I stared at the screen until it went black again. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the television playing some sitcom neither of us had been paying attention to. Mark shifted in his sleep, but didn't wake up. His phone rested inches from my hand. I had never gone through his phone before. Not once. In 15 years together, I never felt the need. We knew each other's passwords when we first got married, but over time, that trust became something we didn't even think about. His phone was his, mine was mine. That night, everything felt different. I picked it up. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped it. I entered the passcode I had known for years. Wrong password. I frowned. I tried our anniversary. Wrong again. My birthday, wrong. Somewhere over the past few months, he'd changed it without mentioning a word. A cold wave spread through my chest. When had he done that? And why? Before I could think any further, Mark stirred. I quickly placed the phone back on the couch just as he rubbed his eyes. "I must have fallen asleep," he mumbled. "You did." He smiled lazily. "I'm heading to bed." I forced myself to smile back. "I'll be there in a minute." The second he disappeared upstairs, I burst into tears. Not loud sobbing, just silent tears rolling down my face as my mind tried to connect pieces that didn't fit. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Emily was telling him something private about her divorce. Maybe she'd asked him not to tell me because she was embarrassed. But then, why delete the messages? Why change the password? Why hide everything? The next morning, I apologized to myself for even thinking the worst. I decided I wouldn't accuse anyone without proof. If there was an innocent explanation, I wanted to find it. If there wasn't, I needed to know the truth. So I started watching, not obsessively, quietly. The first thing I noticed was how often Mark smiled at his phone. Not the quick smile you give a funny meme. It was softer, warmer. The kind of smile he used to give me when we first started dating. Whenever I walked into the room, the smile disappeared. His phone went face down. Every single time. Emily had changed too. She stopped calling me after work. Instead, she'd text. Short messages. "Busy today. Maybe next week. Sorry, I'm exhausted." But every time I opened social media, she'd somehow found the energy to go out. Sometimes she'd post pictures from a coffee shop, sometimes from a park. Always alone, or so it seemed. One Saturday afternoon, I was folding laundry when Mark announced he was going to help a coworker move furniture. "I'll probably be gone most of the day." "Which coworker?" He hesitated. "Jason." I knew Jason. We'd had dinner with him and his wife twice. Without thinking, I texted his wife. "Hope the move goes smoothly today." She replied less than a minute later. "Move? What move? Jason's been golfing since 8 this morning." I read her message 3 times, then a 4th. I felt my stomach twist. Mark had lied. Not about something small, about where he was spending his entire Saturday. When he came home that evening, he looked tired. There were way more boxes than I expected. He laughed. I looked directly into his eyes. "Really? Yeah?" That must have been exhausting. It was. He kissed my forehead and walked upstairs to shower. He lied so naturally, without hesitation, without guilt. That scared me more than anything. Over the next week, I started paying attention to our phone bill. We shared the account, something I'd never bothered checking before. One evening, after Mark went to bed, I logged in. At first, nothing stood out. Then I searched for Emily's number. My breath caught. Dozens, no, hundreds of calls. Late at night, early mornings, lunch breaks. Some lasted only a minute. Others stretched nearly an hour. The dates went back almost 11 months. I sat frozen in front of my laptop. How had I never noticed? Every time he'd said he was working late. Every time she'd claimed she needed a night alone. Were they talking to each other? I wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. Friends talked. People needed support. But not like this. Not in secret. Not every single day. The next afternoon, Emily stopped by unexpectedly. She hugged me tightly at the front door. "You look tired," she said. "I haven't been sleeping well." She studied my face for a second. "Everything okay?" I almost laughed. The irony burned. "I'm just stressed." She squeezed my hand. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Those words almost broke me. She stood in my kitchen, promising she'd always be there for me, while I wondered if she'd already stolen the one person I trusted most. That night, after Mark fell asleep, I made a decision. If they were deleting messages, maybe they hadn't deleted everything. And I knew exactly where to start looking. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily standing in my kitchen, smiling at me like nothing had changed. I replayed every conversation we'd had over the past year, searching for clues that should have been obvious. By morning, I realized something that made me feel even worse. I wasn't just trying to find out if my husband was cheating. I was hoping to prove he wasn't. That hope was the only thing keeping me together. The next day, Mark left early for work. Or at least, that's what he told me. As soon as I heard the garage door close, I opened my laptop. Months earlier, I'd helped him set up cloud backups for his phone because he kept complaining about losing pictures. He wasn't very good with technology, so I had done everything myself. I wasn't even sure the backups were still active. When I logged into the account, I found that they were photos, notes, calendar entries, nothing unusual at first. Then I noticed a folder labeled "Recently Deleted." Most of it was junk, blurry photos, screenshots of recipes, pictures of receipts. But mixed in were screenshots of text conversations. Not the conversations themselves, just screenshots. Almost as if someone had wanted to save certain messages before deleting everything else. The first image made my heart race. Emily had written, "I hate lying to her." Mark replied, "Just a little longer. She's starting to notice." I stared at those words until they blurred. There it was. No misunderstanding. No innocent explanation. They were talking about me, about lying to me. I felt sick. I wanted to stop looking. Instead, I opened the next screenshot. "I miss waking up next to you." Another. Last night was worth the risk. Another? She thinks we're just friends. I slammed the laptop shut. The room suddenly felt too small. I rushed into the bathroom and threw up. Afterward, I sat on the cold tile floor for nearly half an hour, trying to breathe. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was calculated. Every family dinner, every birthday, every holiday. They had smiled at me together. When I finally returned to the laptop, I forced myself to keep going. If I was going to destroy my marriage, I needed the whole truth, not pieces of it, everything. I opened the calendar backups. Most entries were normal: meetings, dentist appointments, reminders to change the oil in his car. Then I noticed a repeating appointment simply labeled "client lunch" every other Thursday, always from noon until 3, for almost a year. That seemed strange, because Mark had often complained that he hated long business lunches. Curious, I checked my own calendar. Almost every one of those Thursdays matched a day Emily had canceled plans with me. Not feeling well. Busy helping my mom. Working late. Different excuses. Same afternoons. A chill ran through me. I started comparing dates. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever Mark claimed he had a client lunch, Emily somehow disappeared too. I pulled up our photo library. We had taken hundreds of pictures over the past year. Birthday parties, cookouts, weekend trips. At first, I was looking for something obvious. Instead, I found something much worse. Tiny details. In one photo from a barbecue, Emily was wearing a silver bracelet. A week later, Mark came home with an identical shopping bag from the jewelry store. He told me he'd bought a watch for a coworker's retirement gift. I never questioned it. In another picture, Emily suddenly had a designer handbag she'd once told me she could never afford. Around that same time, Mark had mentioned an unexpected expense on our credit card statement and brushed it off as new tools for the garage. I remembered believing him without hesitation. How many lies had I accepted simply because I trusted him? The answer terrified me. I downloaded copies of everything I found onto a flash drive and hid it inside an old box of Christmas decorations in the attic. If Mark realized I knew, I couldn't risk losing the evidence. Later that evening, he came home carrying flowers. My favorite lilies. A random surprise. A gesture that would have made me cry with happiness just a month earlier. "You deserve these," he said, smiling. For what? For putting up with me. I looked at the flowers, then at him. Was this guilt or coincidence? I thanked him anyway. We ate dinner together. We talked about work. We laughed at something on television. To anyone looking through the window, we were a perfectly happy couple. But every smile he gave me now felt rehearsed. Every touch felt borrowed. That night, after he fell asleep, I quietly searched the pockets of the jacket he'd worn to work that morning. Nothing. His wallet. Nothing. Then I picked up his leather work bag. Inside were folders, a notebook, charging cables, and an envelope folded in half. It wasn't addressed to anyone. When I opened it, 2 hotel keycard sleeves slipped onto the bed. My hands froze. The checkout date was just 3 days earlier, and printed beneath the hotel logo was a room number, along with the names of the 2 registered guests. One was my husband. The other wasn't hidden behind initials anymore. It was Emily's full name. I stared at the hotel receipt until the words stopped looking real. Mark Harrison, Emily Carter. 1 room, 1 night, 3 days earlier. I checked the date again. 3 days ago, Mark had kissed me goodbye before work and texted around noon. "Long day, don't wait up for dinner." Emily had sent me a message that afternoon too. "I'm driving to my mom's for the night. Talk tomorrow?" I remembered replying with a heart emoji. I wished her a safe drive. Neither of them had been where they said they were. I folded the receipt exactly the way I'd found it and slid it back into the envelope. Then I returned everything to Mark's bag with almost obsessive care. If he realized I'd been looking, he'd start covering his tracks even more carefully. I needed proof that couldn't be explained away. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed him goodbye. "Tough day ahead?" I asked. He sighed dramatically. "Meetings all afternoon. I'll probably be late." "Okay." He smiled, climbed into his car, and drove away. I counted to 30 before grabbing my keys. I had never followed anyone before. The idea felt ridiculous, embarrassing, like something from a television drama. But the woman who trusted blindly had disappeared the moment I saw that first message from Emily. I stayed several cars behind him, terrified he'd notice me. Instead of heading toward his office downtown, he turned onto the highway heading east. My pulse quickened. His office was west. Where was he going? 20 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of a small shopping center. There wasn't much there. A grocery store, a pharmacy, a coffee shop. He parked near the coffee shop but didn't get out. He simply waited. I parked on the opposite side of the lot where a delivery van partially blocked my car. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I almost convinced myself I'd made a mistake. Maybe he really was meeting a client. Then I saw Emily's car. She parked 2 rows away. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she stepped out. Even from a distance, I recognized the sweater I'd helped her pick out 2 months earlier. She smiled before she even reached his car. Mark got out. He looked around quickly. Not nervously, habitually, like someone making sure no one was watching. Then he walked straight to her. They hugged. Not the quick hug friends give each other. This was slow, comfortable, intimate. She rested her head against his chest. His hand slipped around her waist as if it belonged there. I felt every ounce of blood drain from my body. "No," I whispered. "No, please," as if my voice could somehow erase what I was seeing. Then he kissed her. Not a hesitant kiss, not a confused mistake. It was the kiss of 2 people who had done this many times before. I couldn't hear them. I didn't need to. The way they smiled afterward told me everything. Emily laughed at something he said and lightly punched his shoulder. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was a gesture I'd always believed belonged only to me. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes, maybe 15. Time stopped making sense. Part of me wanted to jump out of the car, to scream, to demand an explanation. Instead, I stayed perfectly still. Because once I confronted them, there would be no going back. I wanted the truth, all of it, not another lie. Eventually, they walked into the coffee shop together. I watched through the window as they sat in a corner booth. They looked comfortable. They weren't acting like 2 people terrified of getting caught. They looked like a couple. They shared a muffin. Emily reached across the table and wiped something from Mark's lip. He laughed. That laugh. The one I'd spent years believing was mine. I quietly started my car and drove away. Halfway home, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep them on the steering wheel. I cried until there were no tears left. Then I wiped my face, fixed my makeup in the rearview mirror, and went home. That evening, Mark walked through the front door carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. I figured neither of us would feel like cooking. He smiled exactly the way he always had, as though nothing had happened. Dinner was almost unbearable. He talked about a difficult client meeting. I nodded. He complained about traffic. I nodded again. Every sentence was another lie. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Emily. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hey," she said cheerfully. "I was thinking about you today." The words hit me like a slap. "Were you?" "Yeah. We haven't had a girls' night in forever." I looked across the living room. Mark was pretending to watch television, but I noticed his eyes flick toward me for just a fraction of a second. "I've been busy," I replied. "We should fix that," Emily said. "How about Friday?" Friday. The same day Mark had already told me he'd be working late. My heart pounded. That sounds nice. I miss you. I closed my eyes. I miss you too. When I hung up, Mark smiled from the couch. What did Emily want? I looked directly into his eyes. She said she was thinking about me today. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw it. A flicker, barely a second, but it was there. Guilt. He recovered almost instantly. She's a good friend. I held his gaze. Yeah. Then he looked away first.